The Black Ship Side Story, What's the Job? Chapter 18. Cheers went up amongst Nico and his crew in the mess hall as they celebrated their latest victory over the Taigans. As the drinks started to be poured, Nico noticed the rest of his guests weren't present. "Amara!" he called out boisterously. "Aye, Captain," she replied happily. "Call the Staples, and call Lord Gabriel. They should be here for this as well," he ordered happily. She gave a quick salute, disappearing in a flash. Within a few minutes, the others had gathered in the mess hall. Nico rose from his seat. "Ah, good," he said enthusiastically as he approached. "My dear Lord Gabriel, allow me to introduce you to a few guests of mine. Or temporary crew members, you could also say," he finished with a grin. For his part, Gabriel looked at the whole scene with apprehension, especially as his attention was turned toward a commoner-looking family he had never met. It wasn't that he had anything in particular against them. He just felt like the captain was up to something he wouldn't overly appreciate. Nevertheless, he presented himself respectfully in his crisp new clothes and well-groomed hair. Of note, even his sideburns were starting to grow back in now that he didn't have to worry about being incognito. Moving among the Staples, Nico gestured toward Gabriel. "Allow me to introduce his lordship, Gabriel Draymore, son of Duke Cornelius Draymore." Immediately, all the Staples' eyes widened in shock and no small amount of fear as they instinctively but stiffly bowed out of respect. Gabriel frowned and moved closer, holding out his hands in a friendly manner. "Please, you may rise. Who do I have the pleasure of meeting?" Nico raised a curious eyebrow, surprised to see such cordiality from Gabriel. Last he remembered, he was quite the snob. Still, the gesture was a welcome surprise. "My lord, this is Mr. Wirt Staples, his charming wife, Winona, and their two boys, Weskel and Wham." As he spoke, Nico eyed Gabriel closely to see what his reaction would be to this new revelation. His patience was rewarded by a look of increasing shock evident on Gabriel's visage. "You might be aware of their other son, a certain Baron Wyatt Staples?" Gabriel asked, cutting off Nico. "You are the family of Baron Wyatt Staples?" he asked with more surety in his tone, and a small smile beginning to grow on his face. The Staples all slowly nodded, unsure whether this was a good or bad thing, that the lord in front of them seemed so happy. "It's a pleasure to meet you all," Gabriel said enthusiastically. "I've been watching the exploits of your son ever since I escaped my father. It's truly been a wonder to see how much he has achieved in such a short time." A certain trio was starting to feel faint, so it was Winona who spoke up next after swallowing hard. "The pleasure is all ours, my lord, and we thank you for your kind words regarding our Wyatt." It was then that a worm of suspicion made its way into Gabriel's mind as his smile faltered. Turning back to Nico, he asked, "How is it you come to have Lord Wyatt's family in your care?" Nico huffed a small laugh. "Same reason as you, in a manner of speaking. I've been charged to ensure their safety till they reach Lord Wyatt." Gabriel's smile thinned into a measuring look. "Is that so?" he said slowly. He narrowed his eyes, wondering what the slippery captain could be leaving out. But nothing. Let us not worry about the whys and what fors," Nico interrupted. "I brought you all here to celebrate with us. Not interrogate me." "Celebrate what?" Wham piped up excitedly. "Why our victories against both House Caiston and House Taigan, of course," Nico said with a laugh before turning to walk to the bar near the tables where the rest of his crew were. It was now Gabriel who perked up again. "What's this?" "What victories?" "Wait, you're fighting for the prince?" Nico chuckled. "Not exactly. But our efforts have certainly not harmed him," he said as he opened up the locked cabinet containing the booze. "Now come on over and get something to drink," he said, shockingly relaxed now that he was in his home with nothing to fear and little left to hide. Ada was the first over as she reached in, grabbed a fruity rum-like bottle of booze, and kissed Nico on the cheek. "Thank you, Captain," she said in her usually sultry tone before withdrawing to join Myra, who was getting their glasses. Nico just smiled and rolled his eyes playfully after receiving the kiss, and went back to pulling out some of his favorite whiskey. "Wort. What'll it be? Spirits? Or are you a beer man?" "Winona! Wine? Something stronger?" Before they could be asked, Wescal and Wham looked at each other with mischievous grins and ran up to the bar while their parents were still processing the change in the man they had known for weeks, but had never displayed such warmth and hospitality before this. A beer for me, please, Captain," Wirt finally answered before looking at his wife. I don't suppose you'd have tea? Or something sweet that isn't alcoholic? She replied, just as uncertainly. Easy enough, Nico said while sliding a beer to Wirt before pulling out the ingredients for a temple red. How about you, Lord Gabriel? Fancy wine is your drink of choice? Correct? Nico asked, trying to remember Gabriel's favored libation. Or was there something else you'd prefer? Looking at everyone who had turned to see what he'd order, Gabriel grinned and sighed dejectedly. A beer for me as well, if you would be so kind. Nico raised a curious eyebrow. By Julius's name, how long had you been on that ship? He laughed before sliding a beer over to him as well, before going back to finishing Winona's drink. He had just handed it off when his eyes caught sight of the last member of the group. Karta, who had obviously already started the festivities early, sat down heavily, then sat as straight as he could. Trying to look and sound as prim and proper as possible around the lords, he grinned and dramatically slapped his hand down on the bar top. Pour for me a right and rooty, fruity-tooty yum-yum drink. Nico stared at him, stunned, and blinked. And would you like that in a coconut with a lime and orange wedge in it as well? He asked incredulously with a laugh, but couldn't stop the smile spreading across his face. Yes, I want it in a coconut with a lime and orange wedge in it. It's the taste of paradise, and put 5 umbrellas in that bitch, he finished, pointing to the drawer with the festive items for drinks. Completely unable to keep the persona up, they all burst out into laughter, as Nico was amused enough to actually pull out the stuff required to make it as ordered. There you go, Karta. Will that do? Yes, Captain. Thank you, Karta replied quickly, much more subdued and slightly embarrassed, despite himself. But still giggling as he took the drink and stumbled to the table, Ada and Myra were at with his prize. Upon seeing Kartak's drink, Wham's eyes lit up. Captain, he started as he watched the concoction move away with the blue Zeno. Can I? The captain grinned. Yes, I can make you one too. Do you want 5 umbrellas as well? Just one is fine, Wham said. I feel like they would get in the way. Fair enough, Nico said while shifting his gaze to Weskel. And you? Weskel looked around the selection, but his eyes finally settled on a cognac from a place he didn't recognize. Would it be all right if I tried the cognac over there? Well, look at you and your more sophisticated self. Even the great lord over there only ordered a beer. He jested, poking a little fun at Gabriel, who was suddenly lamenting his choice of beverage. Weskel blushed a little. I'm sorry. Don't worry about it, I can have a beer. Tosh, Nico snapped as he poured some of the cognac and handed it off before continuing with Wham's drink. Once everyone was served, he poured himself a double of his favored whiskey, then raised his glass after gaining everyone's attention. Here's to us all. Cheers. As the Staples gravitated toward Nico's crew, a playful Ada pulled the boys over to hug before they all sat to talk. Meanwhile, Gabriel took a small sip of his beer as he moved closer to Nico. Come on, Nico. What is this about victories against House Caiston and Tygan? He asked in a low voice, unsure of whether it was supposed to be a secret or not. Nico sighed but maintained his smile as he sipped his whiskey. I assume you are aware of House Gimor joining the prince by now, he asked, then waited until Gabriel acknowledged him with a quick nod. That would be because of us, he grinned proudly. Of more recent happenings, I'm hoping our efforts are able to recreate that event with House Tempest as well. In so doing, I would have also very publicly shamed both Caiston and Tygan houses while simultaneously painting Lord Draymore's cause in a bad light. He laughed as he imagined the headlines. For what house would want to align themselves with such dishonorable and incompetent people? He watched Gabriel closely as the young Draymore put all the pieces together. And then the piece de resistance, as far as my crew is concerned, is the small matter of siphoning away 50.5 billion credits from traders' coffers. Gabriel froze mid-sip. His eyes widened, and the beer, which had barely touched his lips, lowered as his mouth dropped. Yes, that is precisely the look my crew had as well. It's not enough to cripple your father's forces, I'm afraid. But it should be enough to force them to tighten the old purse strings very early in this little dispute. Nico then leaned in closer in a conspiratorial manner as he sought to implant the idea in Gabriel's mind that he and his crew were truly on the loyalist side. But don't mention the money part to the Staples. I have a gift in mind for them and would appreciate you not spoiling it. The comment threw Gabriel for a loop as he was more focused on how everything he had just heard would shift the course of the succession dispute. "Sure," he said simply as he tried to get back on track. "But I still don't understand." It's all right. You are not required to," Nico chuckled, cutting his old acquaintance off. "But that is why we are celebrating." Wrapping his arm around Gabriel's shoulder, Nico steered the man toward the rest of the group to gently indicate the conversation was over. Gabriel frowned, his frustration of being out of the loop leaving him feeling like he was being coddled. Being in no true position to argue, however, he allowed himself to be directed toward the main group. Joining everyone, Nico cast a glance at the staples. Calling out to nobody in particular, he asked, "So, I don't think I asked before, but how have you all enjoyed having a noble relative?" And just like that, all of the staples' faces soured. "Great!" shouted Wham excitedly. "Terrible!" Westcall complained at the same time. Nico grinned. "Is that right?" he asked rhetorically, then looked at Wirt and Winona. Wirt shrugged. "I got a vacation and was promoted. But even though I'd been qualified for years, I only got them because he became a lord." "You think that's bad?" Westcall complained. "I have so many people at work trying to throw their sisters in my bed in exchange for perks. It's just—" he finished with a shudder. Winona reached out and ran a hand proudly along her middle son's upper back, happy to hear him standing up for principles instead of taking advantage. "I don't know what you're all complaining about," Wham giggled as the drink was already beginning to go to his head. "It's great getting so much attention. But I'm holding out for a pretty noble woman. Maybe a lady baronetess," he pondered. "Oh, or even a baroness. That would be amazing," he laughed before taking another large swig, drawing a disapproving look from his mother. Nico chuckled at Wham's perspective before looking at Winona with a curiously raised eyebrow. Catching the look, she sighed. "I teach basic classes for sewing and other simple household skills. Most of the time, it's just for women who are really down on their luck. Suddenly I have higher-ranking ladies attending, pushing out those that actually need the skills for the hope that I might introduce them to my oldest son." Her shoulders slump a bit as she shakes the thoughts from her mind. It just seems to make everything so valueless. Like we're only good as a rung of a ladder for others to step on and move up in society. The captain nodded, his smile faltering a bit as he took a sip of his whiskey. "Indeed. I'm afraid that doesn't stop with commoners or low-level nobility either. That's generally how it all works. What's worse is when you don't do something for someone, or simply are attached to someone who failed." His eyes drifted toward Gabriel, who clenched his jaws and stared back. "Then you really see how previous loyalty is rewarded." There was a long, uncomfortable pause before Nico's smile returned. "Still, there are a lot of perks to being part of the nobility, too. Good food, clothes, certain privileges above the common law, and housing. And to be fair, not all nobles or those trying to get there are bad people trying to use you." Nico moved over and lightly gestured to Myra. "Some of them can be sterling, tough, dependable, honest, brave, and true." Myra blushed, but grinned. "Please, Captain." "Oh, shut up, Myra. You know I don't mean a word of it," he teased, winking for good measure to show it was said in good fun. They then laughed and clinked their glasses. "So where are you all from?" Wham blurted out, not really noticing the underlying current of what was just said. "I'm fairly curious myself," Gabriel said, quietly eyeing the captain. "Well, that's a bit of a story," Nico admitted, swirling the last of his whiskey. "Do you really want to hear it?" To his surprise, there was a general nodding of everyone's heads. "Very well. I'll tell you. No real need to keep it a secret at this point." So he sat next to Ada with a sigh and reluctantly began their tale across the stars. After all the celebrating and reminiscing, Nico retired to his room and collapsed at his desk with a huff. Things were coming to a head. As they did, old memories he thought long since buried began to resurface. They always did when he had too much to drink. And then he'd work to bury them again. Turning to look at the full dive VR gear sitting not too far away, he reached out for it and soon fitted over his head. With just a thought, the device activated. As the device scanned his brain, it reconstructed his thoughts, making them easy to visualize with his mind's eye. Instantly, his thoughts were transported to another time and place from his youth. In the blink of an eye, he saw his young brothers. A small smile tugged at the corners of his mouth as he relived a particularly fond moment in his memories. Nico and his family were sitting around a campfire while at one of their mountain retreats. The night air smelled of pine and smoke. Embers cracked softly as laughter echoed through the trees. It was late enough that he and his brothers were beginning to act goofy from being overly tired from a long day of hiking and fishing. As they joked and laughed, a mouse caught their attention as it darted through their campsite right through the bunch of them. Thinking the same thing all at once, all three boys were out of their seats and chasing this mouse toward the edge of camp. None of them were quite sure what they were going to do with the creature if they caught it, but they set after it anyway. All three stopped dead in their tracks, however, when the sound of rocks sliding down the hill into the gully bordering the site reached their ears. Considering this area was supposed to be secure, the boys' eyes went wide as their flashlights darted about in an attempt to find what had made the noise. It was a very young Nico who found it first. "There!" he alerted his brothers. In the gloom and through the trees on the other side of the gully, two large eyes glowed while staring back at them. "Run!" Nico ordered in a flash. His younger brothers didn't argue. Fleeing as though hell itself was on their heels, they shrieked and made a mad dash back to camp, yelling for their father as Nico stood his ground and quickly withdrew his small sword. With his sword arm shaking like a leaf on a tree, he slowly raised the point of his weapon at whatever was staring back, completely unable to move from the spot his feet were now planted. The gesture was met with a low growl as two of their family's honor guards came running to his aid, rifle at the ready, while they pushed past his flanks and moved in front of him. Before a shot could be fired, though, the eyes vanished as whatever it was melted away into the forest. Meanwhile, a third honor guard arrived, scooping Nico in his arms before whisking him away back to safety. With another thought, Nico skipped ahead to the next day where he and his siblings were investigating what it was they saw the previous evening. It didn't take long to find the large paw prints of one of the planet's big predatory cats. He smiled as one of the guards praised his bravery for standing his ground against such a beast. The truth was, he had been terrified. All he did was smile and nod by way of a response, too embarrassed to reveal what he had actually been feeling while everyone heaped praises on him. It still made for a good story in the end. And it was also the start of his adrenaline junkie stage, the moment he found out he actually liked the danger. His mind then switched to another memory. This time he was transported back to his family home. The servants were packing the last of his luggage into a luxurious hover vehicle that waited to take him to their family's private landing port for their personal starships. He remembers the cool fall air blowing into his eyes, making them water slightly. His mother cupped his face and kissed his cheeks. "It'll be fine, my darling," she reassured, smiling fondly at her oldest child. "I promise you'll be safe. And it won't be forever." "Yes. And it'll be quite the opportunity for you as well," his father chimed in. "I know you'll make us proud and bring honor to our family." Nico, who was only 12 years old by this point, took in a breath, standing up a little straighter as he puffed out his chest, attempting to look confident as his father had taught him. He forced a small smile and nodded as he hugged both of his parents. Truth was, he was about to be shipped to a minor but powerful house as part of a ritualized hostage negotiation to ensure his parents played by the deal that had been struck. What his parents didn't know was that he had overheard the conversation when he was sneaking to the kitchen on a mission to raid the desert pantry. Unable to bring himself to call out those he loved the most for what was really happening to him, he lowered his head as they ended the embrace. Turning to his brothers, his watery eyes promised to let loose as he saw them sniffling. Nico smiled warmly as he ran in to hug them both at the same time. "It'll be fine. It's like Mother said. I won't be gone forever," he said, trying to reassure them more than even he believed it. "But," he continued, pulling back as he pulled something out of his coat. Holding it out to the second oldest brother, Nico attached a pin that represented a fictional secret society they had made up to his outer coat. "Cade, I hereby promote you to head of our order." He grinned, trying to make it sound official. "It is your job to make sure Taryn stays safe, as it was mine to make sure you were both safe." Nico snapped off a crisp salute to his 10-year-old brother, who did his best to clear the tears from his eyes and looked serious as he returned the gesture. Nico then turned to the youngest. "And you mind your orders. Try not to give him too much grief." He winked before saluting him as well. "Aye, Captain," Taryn said, also trying to sound stronger than he felt. The boys broke the salutes and hugged for one last time before Nico turned and marched off to the vehicle. At this point, Nico clenched his jaws tightly as the memory came to an end. Fighting back a wave of emotions that threatened to overwhelm him, he whispered, "I'm sorry." He sucked in a large gasp of air. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you." While he had become so lost in the memory, he hadn't heard the knock at his door or the hissing sound as it opened. Myra watched in silence as she could see his chest rise and fall with every increasingly labored breath. When she heard his apology, her shoulders unknowingly slumped. She had seen him agitated from dreams over the years, or become melancholy every now and then. But this was the first time she had ever seen her captain display this much sorrow. "Nico?" she asked tentatively, causing him to instantly tense as the sound of her voice yanked him out of his memories. "You didn't think to knock?" Nico asked in a still somewhat shaky tone after taking a moment to compose himself. "I did knock. Amara said she was detecting elevated stress patterns. I came to check on you. And when you didn't answer, I entered," she explained softly as she pulled up a chair next to him while he finally removed his VR headset. Eyeing her quietly from his seat, he was just starting to get his breathing back under control as he replied, "Well, I'm fine, but thank you for checking just the same." Myra raised an eyebrow and simply stared him down. "Really?" Nico insisted. Myra then leaned over and wiped the single tear that had managed to escape down his cheek and gave a small, comforting smile. Nico just sighed and rocked in his chair after allowing her to help in her way. "You know, you never did actually tell me what happened," Myra tried again. "I know you lost your family. You told me about the dream with your mother before, so I know who's responsible. But if they deserved it and you agree, why the hate?" The captain frowned deeply. "Not all of my family deserved that fate. Not me. Not my brothers." "How old were they?" Myra dared to ask after a second's hesitation. "What happened to them?" There was a long, pregnant pause as he wondered if he really felt he could get into it. Finally, he opened his mouth to speak. "My brother Cade was 13. My brother Taryn was 12. They had no part in anything that had to do with that day. Just like I had nothing to do with it. As for what happened," Nico fell silent. He leaned forward, opened a drawer, and pulled out a second VR headset before handing it to her. Myra's eyes went wide as she reluctantly took the headset. "Are you sure?" The captain shrugged as he brought his set back to his head. "You have been with me for years. You've never gone against my orders. You've never tried to pry when I told you I didn't want to talk. Even on mission, you've trusted me when I didn't tell you everything. I think you've earned it." Myra blushed as she was given the opportunity to share something that Nico had always kept a closely guarded secret. She put the headset on and sat back in her chair as the captain turned the system back on and synced her device up so she could see the memories he drew from the depths of his mind, as if they were her own. As their devices activated, they were instantly taken to the inside of a luxurious palace within the confines of their minds. Nico was staring at his datapad after receiving an emergency alert from home. He was already breathing heavily as he packed his things, preparing to be rushed to the starport. Now his adrenaline levels spiked as a pair of servants that he had grown up with before being shipped off as a hostage to House Hempstroke, a minor as it turned out, but very well-connected Banner House appeared on the screen. Being held by them were his two younger brothers, both looking terrified. "Lord Nico, thank Julius!" they gasped. "We have terrible news. The palace is under attack. We haven't been able to contact your parents, your grandparents, or anyone. The honor guard is holding for now, but we don't know where to go. We don't even know why we are under attack. It's like there is some kind of riot outside or something. Please tell us what we need to do," they begged. "Nico! We're scared!" his brother Taryn cried. For his part, Nico could only stare back, mouthing words, but with no sounds leaving his lips as the telltale reports of battle were clearly drawing closer, while he watched a seeming repeat of the horror he had just finished with his mother. For a moment, he again felt like that little boy staring down the beast, terrified, unable to move as death stared back at him hungrily. "Captain! What do we do?" his brother Cade pleaded, desperation dripping off every word. Nico managed to pull himself together enough to finally speak. "First, remain calm. Be brave," he stammered as his mind raced for a possible solution. Some plan to deal with a situation he still couldn't even fathom. His two younger brothers nodded as they did their best to shore up their courage, even as the servant's courage faltered. "Tell me, do you His words were interrupted when an honor guard's body fell behind them, causing them all to gasp. Seconds later, several Marines barged in alongside a noble officer. The servants instinctively stood between them and the boys, but lowered to their knees. "Please, my lord!" "Mercy!" "We haven't done anything?" "Mercy for the children!" Their pleadings were swiftly answered by the officer drawing his sidearm and putting a single bullet through the heads of both servants. As they crumpled to the floor, falling backwards, both boys began to cry, even as Cade attempted to get in front of Taryn. "Stop!" Cade yelled through the tears. "By order of how—" But before he could finish, his demand was halted by a hailstorm of bullets that ripped through the bodies of both children until they dropped without a further sound. The scene suddenly shifted to a different angle as a security monitor was accessed. Confirming Nico's greatest fears, the bodies of his brothers lay lifeless on the floor. Their still warm blood mingled with that of the servants, creating a veritable pool of red spreading across the tiles. A glint of light coming from Cade's hand caught the young man's eye. As he zoomed in, he saw the pin Nico had given him before he left home 3 years prior. His pin was still clutched firmly in Cade's lifeless hand. The memory faded, leaving only the quiet hum of the ship. The air in the cabin felt heavier now as Myra pulled the headset off and quickly wiped away a few tears. She had felt every bit of her captain's emotions as he relived his brother's final moments for her. Nico slowly removed his headset and stared at her, his hollowness speaking volumes. His jaws clenched with a vice-like tension as he forced himself by sheer will not to break in front of his officer. "Now you know," he said shakily alongside a small shrug. "It's for them that I'm back. It's for them. I now seek my vengeance." Myra nodded before walking over and wordlessly drawing him into a caring hug, silently comforting the usually closed-off man. And for once, Nico didn't resist.
Looking for more? The latest chapters of The Black Ship, The Human from a Dungeon, Terran Contact, and loads more are all on Vox 9, a new audiobook platform I've built for independent authors. 95% of the content is free, so go check it out now at vox9.io.